Following its extremely successful launch as one of the most anticipated games of 2022, God of War Ragnarok has received a flood of negative user reviews. Its predecessor won Game of the Year in 2018, beating out hits like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Marvel's Spider-Man. Still, the question remains, why is it receiving so many negative reviews? What do the fans truly want from the game? Let's find out. To begin, God of War Ragnarok hit with a wave of negative user reviews. It was a historical release and many predicted it would win Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Although God of War Ragnarok came barreling onto the scene, Elden Ring took home the coveted award. Perhaps there's a reason for this, as the game has recently received a slew of negative Metacritic reviews. While it may not be fair to call it a review bombing, because the game still has a solid 7.9 user rating, it does stand in stark contrast to the overwhelmingly positive reviews. Many negative reviews gave the game a 0 rating, which seems unfair given that the game is fully functional, even if you don't agree with its creative decisions. According to various reviews, the game is boring, repetitive, and overrated, some even criticizing the game's pacing, claiming that it takes too long to tell its story and forces the player into lengthy cutscenes. Of course, these are fair criticisms, even if the score appears exaggerated. On the other hand, some of these negative user reviews begin to reveal the true motivation behind their score. One review criticized the insertion of modern politics in media without elaborating, and another blamed their problems with the game on Sony, Santa Monica's hiring of females, and LGBTQ developers. The latter review also complained about making Kratos too soft, which made him appear weak and feminine. Although everyone is entitled to their own opinion, some user reviews are odd. Moving on, God of War Ragnarok is another riff on The Last of Us Part 2 structure. God of War Ragnarok shows Tyr slowly rising to his feet to tower over Kratos, and it takes its sweet time doing so. For the first few hours, it is a structural retread of 2018, but Ragnarok splits our heroes up and keeps them apart for the majority of the game. After witnessing the Kratos to Atreus handoff 3 times, it's clear what's going on. The game switches to Atreus for a long stretch, then back to Kratos for another long stretch. This game tells 2 stories of equal importance. So as I've continued to play, God of War Ragnarok has become increasingly reminiscent of another Sony sequel, The Last of Us Part 2. That game, like Ragnarok, had 2 protagonists and spent roughly equal time with each of them. The intro alternated between Ellie and Abby until Joel's death, and followed Ellie for the next 12 to 15 hours, as she went on a cross-country revenge quest with Dina to spend 3 bloody days in Seattle. As Ellie's story came to a close, our attention was drawn to Abby. We spent 3 violent days in Seattle once more, but this time the story wasn't about seeking vengeance. It was a quest for healing and redemption in the aftermath of revenge. After the 2 protagonists met for the game's violent climax, The Last of Us Part 2 gave us alternating narratives, as Abby and Lev formed a new family and Ellie lost hers. Following that, what do we know about Naughty Dog's masterpiece? Naughty Dog's masterpiece is 2 full-fledged games tied together by a narrative bow. God of War Ragnarok has a similar structure, but it's braided. As it benefits its Norse setting, we play as Kratos for a while, then the one-shot camera moves behind Atreus' back and we follow him for a while. The game also finds clever ways to work around the constraints of its no-cut ethos, for the first few times putting Kratos and Atreus in the same room, and moving on to the other character is sufficient, but Atreus' decision to go to Odin in Asgard complicates things. Santa Monica Studios gets around this by match-cutting from Atreus leaving a knife on his bedside table to Kratos picking one up in Sindri's house. Next up, the AAA game. The Last of Us Part 2 and God of War Ragnarok demonstrate that the linear AAA game has grown too large for its good. The original TLOU was 13 hours long, and the original God of War was less than 10. According to HowLongToBeat.com, The Last of Us Part 2 takes about 24 hours to complete, and Ragnarok takes about the same. Both estimates are based on completing only the campaign, and both games are dozens of hours longer if you deviate from the path. To paraphrase a Pantheon's holy book, these games feel like new wine poured into old wineskins. The new expectation is that AAA games will take dozens, if not hundreds, of hours to complete. However, Santa Monica Studios and Naughty Dog continue to make games traditionally linear, complete, and free of microtransactions. These are not open world or forever games, they're single-player action games with a focus on the story. So how do you expand to meet the demands of the modern AAA market without losing all of the dramatic tension? God of War Ragnarok and The Last of Us Part 2 have come to the same conclusion: you tell two stories. Ellie's and Abby's stories are planned to be told over 12 to 15 hours. When you finish God of War Ragnarok, expect Kratos's and Atreus' stories to be roughly the same length. Moving on, God of War Ragnarok pays poetic homage to Last of Us. The Last of Us Part 2 poem is one of 14 PlayStation-themed compositions in the game. Ratchet & Clank, Uncharted, Death Stranding, and even MLB, the show, are all mentioned in Kvasir's poem. One particularly clever poem is a haiku in honor of the Ghost of Tsushima. Creating haikus was ironically one of the Ghost of Tsushima's more enjoyable minigames. Given how similar The Last of Us is to the newer God of War entries, it's not surprising that an Easter egg for the Naughty Dog classic ended up along Kratos' path. The similarities in style and critical acclaim between the two games eventually led to a friendly Twitter feud between God of War director Cory Barlog and Last of Us director Neil Druckmann over whose game was better. Santa Monica Studios, the developer of God of War Ragnarok, has also followed Naughty Dog in terms of accessibility options and has made numerous efforts to emulate The Last of Us with the Ragnarok's gameplay accessibility features. Because the mystical Kvasir was a traveling sage who delighted in sharing wisdom from distant lands, finding his poems about other PlayStation worlds in God of War Ragnarok is all the more fitting. It also alludes to the amazing possibility that Kvasir may have visited the realms of other games on his travels between the post-pandemic dystopia of The Last of Us Part 2 and the apocalyptic world of God of War Ragnarok. One has to wonder which Kvasir would have preferred. Following that, God of War's Greek and Norse mythologies share primordial origins. Ares bestowed the Blades of Chaos on Kratos after forging the weapons in the depths of the underworld, Greek mythology's realm of the dead. Perhaps the underworld, like Muspelheim and Niflheim, arose from the spark of the world. This could have happened in a Big Bang-like event that resulted in the creation of Kratos' Grecian homeland and the 9 realms of God of War Ragnarok from the older games. The God of War franchise is no stranger to primordial powers. Previous games featured the Primordials, a race of ancient gods who predated those of Greek and Norse mythology. The first giant, Ymir, is mentioned in the Norse games as part of the primordial race. Surtur and his wife, Sinmara, appear to be in that category of gods. However, with the introduction of the Spark of the World in God of War Ragnarok, more mysteries about primordial magic have emerged, which can be explored in future titles. Next up, the sensation of throwing the Leviathan axe in God of War is extremely satisfying. The use of PlayStation's DualSense controllers is a big part of what makes throwing the Leviathan axe in God of War Ragnarok so satisfying. The game makes excellent use of the controller's adaptive haptic feedback, providing slightly different sensations when performing different in-game actions. The little bumps, nudges, and vibrating flourishes it emits when Kratos throws and catches the Leviathan axe are a subtle touch that adds to the weapon's appeal. Throwing the Leviathan axe in God of War Ragnarok demonstrates what the PS5 DualSense controller is capable of. As the axe leaves Kratos' hand, the controller vibrates, and as it flies through the air, the haptic feedback pulses lightly with the rhythm of the axe drifting to the right side of the controller as it approaches Kratos' hand. It lands with a satisfying thunk and a final vibration, completely immersing the player in the throw's action. Sure, players can toss Mjolnir in Marvel's Avengers, but the experience does not compare to the immersive nature of tossing the Leviathan axe in the God of War games. That being said, God of War would have been better off not giving Kratos Mjolnir, as it would have diminished the allure of the Leviathan axe's player actions. Players may come for God of War, but they stay to take another swing with the Leviathan axe. Finally, God of War can finally embrace the open world format. Previous God of War games have been fairly linear experiences, though God of War Ragnarok's largest and best area does experiment with an open world format. Backtracking is common in the franchise's Greek era, with Kratos traveling through Athens multiple times in the first game and visiting Atlantis twice in Ghost of Sparta. The franchise's Norse era games expand significantly Finally, allowing players to explore the Nine Realms at leisure, Vanaheim's crater, the largest level in God of War Ragnarok, brings the series even closer to a true open-world experience by including roaming enemies to fight and numerous side quests to discover. The next God of War era can continue to scale up the series by putting Kratos on a full-fledged open-world adventure. The next God of War game may allow players to go wherever they want, creating a mythological setting, devoid of linear pathways and restricted areas. This open-world style could be similar to The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, or the Horizon games, with Kratos traveling on foot or acquiring a mythological mode of transportation. Objectives can also be completely non-linear, with the title possibly presenting the Ghost of Sparta with a list of deities to confront, but allowing the player to visit them in any order. Well, that marks the end of our video for today, my friends. We hope you enjoyed it. Please let us know in the comments what you thought, and while you're down there on your way out, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you for watching.